Check, check. Mic check here. Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the regular Planning Commission meeting for Scottsville's Planning Commission. Today is March 6, 2023. My name is Matt Lawless. I serve as Scottsville's Town Administrator. This evening's meeting is held in compliance with the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and the state's open meeting laws. We're meeting here in person at the Town Hall, 401 Valley Street in Scottsville. There are also opportunities for the public to join and participate both by phone and online. The meeting does not include a formal public hearing, but does have a general public comment period where everyone is welcome to participate. If you're viewing the meeting in the future on our YouTube stream, thank you very much. We're still assembling our quorum and setting up for the meeting here. So I'll mute this line until we come to order. Thank you.
Let's call the meeting to order. We have a quorum.
Benjamin.
Hello. Here.
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 Strasson.
Here.
And then Johnson and Briscoe You have one.
Okay, great. Do we agree to the agenda? Yeah. I make a motion to approve the agenda. A second. Okay, all in favor? Aye. All right, passes. Minutes. I'm gonna see how we get to that.
I make a motion to table the approval of the minutes until the next meeting.
I second that. All in favor?
I
Very good. Thank you for getting us the minutes, but we need a little bit more time with them.
Okay.
Who'd like to give the report on relevant actions by town council?
Go ahead.
The town council started their budget discussions in last month's regular meeting and at a special meeting held last week. It's a difficult budget situation with a recession forecast in the next year. We can look for some silver lining with the opening of new businesses in town, things like the Tiger Field construction starting now. But the overall trend has us concerned about flatter business and meals tax revenue. And the expiration of federal grant support funds that Scottsville has used in previous years. So it makes for some difficult priority setting that town council can move forward on some of its goals, but not all of them. So they'll continue that budget process through an adoption in May with opportunities to be involved. And we welcome that input about also. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. It's maybe a little awkward, and I don't mean to put it at you, but when we got the relief funds for COVID,
Yes.
did we have some idea that it was gonna last forever? Why did we appropriate those
No,
funds into the budget?
absolutely. It's a fair question. The rules did develop over time. And if anything, they became friendlier to the town as the treasury worked through its rulemaking. And there were very few strings attached about how they could be used. Small towns were able to use it for general operating support. Town council wisely chose to focus those funds on short-term projects that didn't create like long-term operating impacts.
Sure.
Hiring new staff whose permanent salaries needed to be continued would be unwise there. So the closest impact like that we see is with the DMV Select, where it's working in partnership with the state agency, used the federal funds to start it up, and now we need to make a decision about whether to continue it.
Yeah,
But capital projects like sirens for the flood control station, police equipment upgrades like cameras and computers, those are good opportunities.
all really good opportunities. I was just curious why the budget continued once we moved away from that. I just didn't know why we depended on it, I guess, in such a way.
Mhm.
Like short-term capital projects are great.
Yeah.
And would have a finite kind of end.
Mhm.
I know that with the salaries, it went up a lot, but was that because we thought we were gonna continue to have that money, or? It was just,
You asked why give raises in the past 3 years?
no. I'm not gonna ask a question like that. I'm just saying, were we looking at this money as going on forever?
We knew we had a certain time period to account for expenditure of all those funds that we received. We knew from the start that there were deadlines to meet and ends to this thing. So
Okay,
we went into it that way. What can we do now? To use the funds that they're appropriated for and use them wisely before our cutoff date.
okay. It just seems like we overreached with those funds for the future.
Perhaps.
Is that not right? I just was curious, because reading about it, I just was wondering.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's an awkward transition. Town council did also approve the special use permit for the Arts Education Center in the Sandland. They had a little bit more discussion to do for the commercial rezoning at 520 Valley Street, Messina Valley's property. So that one was tabled until next month for a little more discussion. But appreciating planning commission's work on both of those. The other recommendation planning commission sent forward last month was the cancellation of the VDOT sidewalk project to rescope and redesign it for cost control. Town council appreciated that input as well and concurred, moving ahead to cancel and redesign that project. Thank you.
Was there any opposition to the scan project?
No.
Okay. Do you have any questions? Matters from the public. Anyone online?
No.
Okay, new business, subdivision review East Village project.
Would you like to introduce that?
So a little bit of background, this is a new proposal before us. This is a by right development. There is a parcel, 2 parcels that are included on here that are already zoned kind of in a unusual manner. They're a lot smaller than the rest of the development, and they're on here because they're not subject to any of our critique at this point in time. I don't know what page that's on. But they're on here because they can also be developed and there will be developed as part of this project. Is that a fair way of explaining that?
Yeah, it's 3 lots, so basically none of the parcel boundaries of the lots are being adjusted. We're just including this because they would be built upon and developed as part of this, like, as part of the existing lots, or, yeah. the
Yeah.
existing lots.
In Paulette Town. Okay, hi.
Yeah, well, I'm Kendra Moon with Line and Grade, Charlie Armstrong with Southern Development. This project, we're here for by right development of, it's 7 existing lots, which 4 of those will be combined to create. We've got roughly 55 acres in the village residential area that will be divided into 32 lots plus the 3 existing lots. And then just over 100 acres in rural areas that will be developed or divided into 10 lots. So this is preliminary in nature. So it's really a high level planning document. A lot of the details will be later down the road. But VDOT is reviewing this and the county of Albemarle is reviewing it for stormwater.
Okay.
And though this is a ministerial kind of thing with a by right subdivision, to me, this is perhaps the ending point for this piece of property and perhaps the starting point. We want to make sure we know what can be done and have something approved that we can jump on if we need to. We're obviously making a large investment here. But especially after listening to your comp plan conversations last week, and again, happening tonight, I guess, some more, and in meetings before that, I think it's really important for us to get some perspective from you all, from neighbors, from the public, and eventually maybe from town council about what the town would ideally like to see here. So this is what we're presenting tonight is what the ordinance allows and says can be developed here now. It's black and white, but it's not necessarily reflective of the goals of the town for the future. So I heard some questions from some of you last week about how important it really was to do comp planning, and would it be listened to, and would it be regarded by town councils. I think it's really important. You all obviously aren't the only voice in that conversation, but a really important voice. So part of what we want to do is get through this part and then sit back and listen and perhaps engage in a new process after that.
Well, yeah, I appreciate your opening up a dialogue. Your comment that this could be the end point or this could be the beginning point. I mean, it makes sense to me that this plan doesn't make sense. No offense.
It's just what the ordinance says.
It's what the ordinance says, and I don't think it's what the town really wants. But, you know, I don't know what the town will support or get behind. So I would like to have a dialogue.
You don't think it's what the town wants? In what way?
Well, I don't think that people wanna give up all that land, that rural land, that green space, that open space. I don't think people wanna be building so close to the creeks. I mean. I'd be curious to see what others say, but it just seems like. You know. This land is something that. We value in town, having it vacant and having it open.
Well, I appreciate them coming to us to make sure that they have the right, idea about what we have in our ordinances, but I think they're, by right, they can do what they want to do. I didn't know that it was going to kind of go to the town to find out what they wanted.
That's not necessarily a tonight conversation,
Yeah,
but we're listening after tonight. That's-
Okay.
Isn't necessarily the end.
yeah.
And at some point, we have to make some decisions and do business, but that's not tomorrow.
Well, the day I figure out what this town wants, I'll let you know.
I'm right there with you.
So that being said. Would you like us to go through the subdivision ordinance and go over this plan? Or,
Do you have a presentation of some sort or?
Not really.
I have like 2 slides prepared just to kind of show the overview of the parcel and some surrounding properties. And I could also, I have the plat on a USB so everyone could see it a little easier if you'd like me to put that up.
sure, let's
I
do that.
think that would be great.
Yeah, there was a question about its proximity to the Van Cleef, and it would be helpful to see some of those boundaries. So we know exactly what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
I would love to go through that with you all a little bit too. Once that's up, so people who are online can see, because I heard some of your questions last week at your meeting about. Yes, last week about that also, and some interesting questions were brought up. As far as process, this is the town's process, so whatever method you all want to go through, the normal in other localities is. The planning commissions look at it, and if they see anything that the commissioners think is not in compliance with the ordinance, then it's brought to our attention and we have to fix it.
Mhm.
And if not, then usually a motion is made to approve it and it moves on.
I heard a question earlier talking about Mink Creek and all that. Is this in between like Van Cleef and Mink Creek or?
Yes, that was the first thing I heard that I think begs for some clarity. Is essentially, once you get to the top of the Scottsville Lake, you don't have to walk very far up that trail before you're on it.
Okay,
And so it's a few hundred yards at most. And then the remainder of that existing trail along the sewer line, before you get up and turn left to go into Scan or go straight ahead to Holly.
Yeah.
That's all part of this property that we're talking about here. The other question that was brought up was about the trail easement. The majority of that trail easement is a permanent easement, as far as I understand. There is a section up near the top, either near Scan or Holly, that's by license that the landowner can cancel at any time. But I don't know the exact definition of that. I'd have to get that.
Is that where it sort of forks? Like there's one part of it that goes up and then another piece that goes off on the side. Is the fork?
I think so, and I don't know if I can give you the specificity on that, except to say it's as you get closer to Holly.
Will you pull up the little presentation? I kind of outlined the easement area on there.
so what was your question, Shannon?
Would we be losing area in Van Cleef? When this gets developed, I think.
It's
Not
that-
in Van Cleef.
Not unless we're like trespassing.
I'm trying to figure out, when you said that you don't have to walk very far before we're on your land, where is the,
Yeah, Matt's got a good,
okay,
It is hard to understand because when we're in the park,
Right.
like the property line's not marked now, so I don't think it's well understood where the boundary of the public land is.
Right.
And
Yeah, because I feel like we walked to the left of the lake all the way up.
I think what would be really constructive, Matt, if you measure from, yeah, there, okay, so that's 1,200 feet.
Yeah.
And then measure from the end of that to Holly, to give an idea of what percentage of that trail. Right,
like 1/3, 2/3.
yeah, roughly 2/3 of that trail is on our property.
Oh, wow.
And everything to the right of the trail, down the ravine and up the next ridge and over the next ridge beyond that. As you're going north,
And does this go past where the scan land is?
yes.
Okay.
So you go past Scan and you would, if you kept going straight, you'd hit Holly.
Mhm.
But everything to the right and around, your match showing right there, everything to the right and around there is an extension of this parcel.
Wow.
Not exactly, but essentially the cleared area there is the village residential portion.
Mhm.
And the wooded area is the rural zoned portion.
Is it currently being used for anything?
Hey,
Hey, hey,
hey. Yeah,
okay.
it's due for a bush hogging right now.
indeed.
Was there anything outside the ordinance that you were interested in doing that kind of was put off by our ordinances?
As a by right for the by right
Yeah.
plan?
Yeah. If you were, I don't know if there were any stumbling blocks. You know, we're glad to go through this with a fine tooth comb and make sure that it's all okay, but I want to know if there's anything that kind of approaches going outside the lines.
Things like frontage.
No, yeah, I mean, ideally, we would allow for smaller lot sizes in the village residential, because you're approaching rural areas. Lot sizes, it's 60,000 square feet required, which is over, it's at 1.38 acres. And the rural areas lot is 2 acres. So it doesn't feel like a residential neighborhood, it's very spread out. And the lot frontage requirements and everything, really require you to spread out the housing. So I think that is something that definitely makes this layout less than ideal, in my opinion, because then like you mentioned, you are developing closer to the stream to maximize density that's allowed by right, but you can't actually really achieve the density allowed by right. That's the only thing that comes to my mind.
The density that would be on paper for a calculation of just area times the density, you weren't able to achieve that because of these other constraints.
Exactly.
So if we indicated to you as a town that it's more important to have a more dense cluster of homes, obviously that would require a special use permit. Is that something that, are you saying that we could open the dialogue here
Sure.
to have those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that I'm opening the dialogue right now.
Okay,
There are trade-offs for things like that. You
Right.
know,
probably more.
a big
homes.
10-acre lot is worth more than a postage stamp lot. And you know, there's a range in between. So we have to balance that economically somehow. But there's lots of opportunities to do all kinds of creative things that we would think people might like, and but I don't really want to presume.
Yeah.
I want to hear first from neighbors, you all, council.
Okay.
What are we thinking about having a public
Public hearing?
hearing for this?
your process doesn't require a formal public hearing. Moving through the checklist and issuing the preliminary plat determination is the process for this one. I do think it lines up well with one of the comprehensive plan discussions about what's in the overall public interest, but there is a kind of a tight time window for the required approval of the preliminary plat. So thank you.
It would be nice to, to know what people are thinking about it. I mean, it doesn't have to be part of the discussion, but certainly, to test the waters on this. It's a very different kind of growth in the area.
Let me ask it of the applicant this way. You made this proposal looking at the by right requirements in our zoning. Were there any elements that you would have liked to have done that you were not able to because of the nature of our zoning?
Yes,
So the density being one.
there are a lot of things that I would do differently. I think there are so many that we can't even get into them. It doesn't feel very village residential like to me. There's a lot of things about a village that this doesn't say to me. So I think I'll leave it there because the list because that's more like a comp plan conversation. And there's just so many things that might be on that list that we could and would do differently if it's the kind of thing the town wants.
I'm kind of feeling like I want to hear more. I want to know, where our strengths are and where our weaknesses are. And obviously it's not everyone else that decides that, but a way to kind of look and see where you might see some deficits on your end.
Yeah, so I don't know if the ordinance itself specifically has deficits. I might say that some of the lot width requirements are pretty rigid for a village residential zone for a by right development. But the rest of the things that I'm thinking of are really more of a not a by right ordinance question. It's more like, do you want to have a PUD ordinance? Do you want to have the comp plan say this should be developed with required open spaces, and with that you get density trade-offs like Albemarle does, a cluster ordinance basically. There's all kinds of things. The idea of a public hearing for a by right subdivision, if you want my
It seems
advice
absurd,
from
but I
doing
want
this
to.
a lot, is all that does is bring people to the meeting with the assumption that they can make a change to this. And then when you ignore them because you're required by law to ignore them,
Right.
they're very frustrated.
Sure.
So if we're talking about longer range stuff, and what maybe can happen here in the future, then that needs all the public input we can get.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about public input for a by right, the purpose that it serves is just to frustrate.
Well, and I was kind of just following your lead a little bit. You had said how you were curious about, how people felt about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And maybe that wasn't your intention, but I just wanted to run with it because I think
We definitely
this
are.
dialogue needs all the help it can get, so.
Yeah, and I hesitate to mix the two processes because they're very different.
I
But if
understand.
we're talking about, after this portion of the meeting, going into the comp plan portion of the meeting and saying, do we want this to be a place where people have cattle grazing in rural lots and, large suburban kind of subdivision feel, or do we want tighter communities, hamlets, big open spaces preserved forever, extreme buffers, trails for the public? And there's just so many things that we should talk about.
Yeah, well, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but it sounds like that might be part of the comp plan discussions and community coordination is to find out maybe what these guys have to say about our ordinances or our comp plan. No, Okay.
I wasn't passing judgment on what you're saying, I mean. I agree that it would be nice to know where the public stands on open spaces now and whether we still support the comp plan as it was written 5 years ago and. What, if anything, the public might like to do about this. I mean, accept it as is by right and fully endorse your developing it, or have a conversation about fixing it and tweaking it and making it something that is more useful and fits into the comp plan.
I think I'm trying to wrap my head around how do we have those conversations within the 60-day time frame that we have to approve the preliminary
And we
plan.
don't. We
Right.
don't, yeah,
So,
we will stick to the specifics. It was a flight of fancy on my part, so I'll leave it.
I don't think it was on your part, it was brought up by Mr. Armstrong, but it could be something that's up for discussion, if that's what the town and the people who participate say is important to them. But I don't know how to make that happen within the time frame given.
Maybe the clarity that's missing from that conversation is that this is preliminary. This is not final.
Yeah,
Right,
This is not going to record. These lots will not exist after your action. They still have to get final approval from all kinds of jurisdictions and authorities. And then we decide whether we want to record the subdivision. We don't have to. So this is just step one. And once we're through step one, we have plenty of time to talk about what could be.
I think that's a good point, and it helps maybe to provide some perspective on how long these development processes take, and to give the Tiger Fields market as an example. It has demolition and clearance happening now. That special use permit was issued by town council almost 4 years ago. Yeah, and so that property required a boundary line adjustment and a different minor subdivision, engineering work, site plan, building permits. So it took years for it to go from the town saying, yes, we want this, to it's actually happening. And hopefully open for business in this calendar year. But I think that's fair for perspective, and that project is far simpler than something like this. So there is plenty of time to work through those kinds of community conversations about how this might change from today to over time.
But we'll still have to work on this to make sure it meets with the ordinance.
What,
So those two things could happen simultaneously. I guess what I'm kind of unsure about is how to proceed with those conversations. So, because we saw how it went down at the tire factory, and it seemed to me that Echelon, and everyone could have a different take on this, but it seemed to me that Echelon was trying to open up the door and have a conversation with the town and with the public through their, email, through their invitation to a public forum that they had facilitated. And some people were turned off by that process and felt that they were, they didn't go about it right. So I don't know, how do we go about it? We have a developer here who has maintained that they want to have a dialogue with the town, and we have this, and we could either say, yes, this meets with our ordinance, or we could say, well, let's have a conversation, and I'd like to have that conversation. I just don't know how to go about it. I do want to have a session with town council, so please make sure I'm on the agenda for that meeting.
Sure.
And that this is going to be my talking point, like, how do you guys want to have this conversation? So yeah, I mean, one suggestion is to open it up to the public and begin to have a public dialogue. How should that happen? Is that something that Southern mediates, or is that something that the town officiates?
I would think that could go hand in hand with the comp plan, the forums that we're planning on having the focus groups.
Well, certainly, one of the,
Well, just about what priorities are and, do people prioritize open space and, hiking trails and nature? Or,
or has that priority changed?
right, yeah, and so I think, if we could hear from people about that, then we could help fit this into that set of priorities, if that's an option, which I'm hearing it might be. But I would also want to hear from town council about whether they're willing to even entertain a special use permit, because I would hate to waste your time and money.
Not as much as I would.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I wouldn't even wanna begin those conversations if it's not gonna go anywhere with the town.
Would you like to dive into this plan detail by kind of comparing it to the checklist and our ordinance? That'll help us understand what we're looking at here and what, kind of the details of.
Yes, could I ask one question first? When was the date of the official submission of this? Like, when did the 60-day calendar or the clock start?
February 20th.
February 20th.
So April 21st is your action deadline.
Okay,
So you've got this meeting, the regular meeting in April, and a special meeting to focus on it if necessary.
I'm sorry, you said April 21st?
Yeah.
thank you.
And we did do the pre-submission conference, Chair Fabiano and I met with Ms. Moon to go over this and get a basic look at it, that there wasn't anything glaringly wrong with it before the The checklist for preliminary plan contents is on page 33 of the subdivision ordinance here. Ms. Moon, would you like to kind of walk us through these items and where they you're welcome to speak and more through. And I think if we go through the document together like that, it'll help us better understand what exactly we're looking at.
And so starting with A, name of subdivision. It's on every plan sheet and on the cover sheet. East Village. B, the identification of all owners and interest holders, so names of the owners of the property, that's also on the cover sheet. In the project summary table on the left-hand side, 7 different properties, all the owners listed. And I guess just interrupt me if you want to like pause on anything. Name of plat preparer, that's me, my name is listed in the project summary table as well. The date of drawing, number of sheets, North Point references scale. The date of the drawing is listed on every sheet, but in the signature seal in the lower right hand corner. The sheet list table lists all of the sheet numbers. And the North Point and scale references are on every sheet that there's a map shown. E, vicinity sketch is also on the cover sheet. We've got high level view of the entire county and then a zoomed in version of the project area and then a key map showing the site specifics just above that.
Perfect.
Part F, existing topographic features and easements. On C 1.0, the existing conditions sheet, this shows kind of the overview of the topographic features and the easements themselves are labeled on sheets C 3.0 to C 3.5 on the 50 scale plan, so you can see them a little better. Part G, proposed streets, alleys, lots, building lines, and easements. These are also located on sheets C 3.0 to C 3.5. So the entire parcel is broken up into 6 different sheets at 50 scale to zoom in on it a bit better. Part H, land to be dedicated or reserved. This is not applicable. Same with letter I, public areas, facilities, or uses not applicable at this time.
I mean, if they were shown in the project, they would be here, but you don't have any of them and are not required to.
Yes, thank you for clarifying. Part J, floodplain. This is zone X, which is the area of minimal flood hazard, so there's no floodplain delineated. And this, a note to this effect is on C 0.0, note 13.
You have small creeks on the property, but nothing is big enough to create a floodplain.
Correct. Letter K, place of burial. There is no indication of a burial site on this property. A note to that effect is on the cover sheet, note 10. Letter L, existing and departing lot lines. That is on C 1.0, all of the adjacent properties and the properties in this parcel. Letter M, proposed lots, the number, approximate dimensions and area of each proposed lot that can be found on sheet C 2.0. And yeah, it's just approximate dimensions shown. Letter N, building sites on proposed lots, those can be found on sheets C 3.0 to C 3.5. So building site locations and the approximate dimensions of the building sites. And I will note there's no actual like requirement on the building sites for these properties, since the rural areas has public water and sewer. The rural areas has access to public water and sewer, so there's no required size of a building site. Like if you have to have a drain field, then your building site's required to be 30,000 square feet just to incorporate room for a drain field.
How binding is this type of building footprint?
Not at all. I mean, those are really just to show that there's space somewhere on site for a building that's outside of the critical slopes. More than 100 feet away from the stream center line and like within the building setbacks. So those could move, they can grow or shrink. They're really just representative.
You show them close to the roads as sort of a common sense example, but they could move if someone wanted a long driveway, as long as they stayed off of these critical slopes.
Exactly, and yeah, within the other restrictions. The letter O, the right of further division of proposed lots. This is on the cover sheet, note number 7. None of the rural areas properties are able to be further divided. We used all the development rights in this subdivision. So there were 10 development rights based on the acreage of the existing parcels. And we used them all, there's 10 parcels. And I listed on the cover sheet as well where the development rights are coming from, in case that's a question. Letter P, instrument creating the property proposed for subdivision. So the deed book and page citation of the instrument or plat where this property was created, that's on C 1.0, the existing conditions. Each parcel's deed book page is listed. Q, the zoning classification of the property, also on C 1.0. Letter R, tax map and parcel number. This is listed throughout, but on the cover sheet and C 1.0. Letter S, drainage district. I actually wasn't able to find anything in the zoning ordinance, subdivision ordinance, or comp plan that is the term drainage district. So I have the watershed of this property listed as note 11 on the cover sheet. But if there's something I missed, and I looked on GIS too.
We don't have any special overlays.
Okay, well. T, topography. The existing topography is shown on C 1.0. Proposed topography is on the grading plan sheets C 3.0 to C 3.5. And then as far as the information that's, there are documents to be submitted with the preliminary plat. Drainage control information is shown on C 4.1, stormwater management plans. Stormwater management information, C 4.0, C 4.1. Sketch plans for utilities, bridges and culverts, there are no bridges. But rough utility layout, as I said, this will be public water and sewer, shown on C 3.0 to C 3.0. And then the statement of availability of services, so the ordinance says that the subdivider shall submit with each preliminary plat, written and signed statements of the appropriate officials concerning the availability of public water and sewer. So I contacted ACSA like a month ago, and I'm still waiting. They said they had to coordinate with RWSA about this and they would get back to me. So I followed up today, but haven't heard anything. But I'm assuming that there's plenty of availability. It's within the ACSA district. And lastly, floodplain and topographic information. Again, it's not really applicable to this site. So I believe that that's everything in the checklist at least. But if there's anything else in the ordinance that we should touch on, I don't have it printed out, but.
I agree. I don't contest any of those, table of contents kind of descriptions. Thank you for walking through it. You did, get in touch with, VDOT as well. The agencies that are relevant here at this point are primarily VDOT and ACSA for utilities.
Yes, that's a good point. I have received VDOT comments already. The plans don't reflect any changes from VDOT yet, but I have not heard back from Albemarle County.
Stormwater will come later when we get closer to like the exact locations of ponds and things like that.
Yes, yeah, Albemarle will approve the preliminary stormwater just basically as a check to make sure that we included it, that, you know, it wasn't some afterthought in terms of the layout, but actual design of stormwater will come much later in the process.
The last checklist item on my side is a formal notice to all of the adjoining property owners as required in this ordinance. I have not done that yet. I appreciate that word has already gotten out and some of the neighbors have here already. Please help continue to get the word out, but you will be getting a letter in the mail identifying that this plan exists and everyone is welcome to come and take a look at it. And we can walk through it the same way we have this evening, but we will not approve it until everyone has had a chance to see that.
So, the easements. The ordinance refers to easements, but, I think your plan refers to like water and utility easements, but should there be something in there about the town's easement to access the sewer line?
They are included, so all easements that encumber the property are included. So the locations of the easements are shown on C 1.0, but the actual label for the easements are on individual grading plan sheets, just because the scale is a little easier to read there. But so all of there's I think a parking easement, a drainage easement, the ACSA easement, those are all shown.
Now, I have a question that might be relevant to why you're asking, is the easements, are they specific to specific uses? So if there's easement for access to the sewer line, does that include easement for like public trail, or is that something separate?
I think we had a question about that earlier as well. I think maybe you mentioned that part of it was revocable and part of it was not. The question has to do with the use that we have the sewer line easement, which should serve as a walking trail, and we haven't been able lock down exactly, will the public access on the walking trail continue?
Yeah, I think the question is a little broader. If there's a sewer line easement, that does not necessarily mean people can walk on it.
That's what,
And if there's a trail easement, that doesn't mean somebody can run sewer to it.
correct.
So those are the two different things, and you have to look to the deeds to those individual easements to know what the permissions are that were granted.
In the
In this case, the trail easement runs along the same route as the sewer. As anybody who walks it would assume.
right.
And so they are coincident. And then there's an upper portion of that trail that exists now that is by a revocable license from the landowner, so it's not a permanent easement. The landowner decides, hey, I don't like this anymore because it injures. Then the landowner can say, we're not gonna continue that portion.
Do you happen to know if that's where the little connector is to the corner there at Holly and Pine?
It is, yeah, and I don't know how far into the property it goes, but yes, that is where it is.
That's what I was saying.
And I think that shows fairly clearly here where the S is marked for the sewer easement, and then the other ones come off this way, and this is where the gate is coming in.
Right.
It doesn't have the same S marking as what the sewer easement was.
I think a lot of people use that trail.
Yeah.
And they go all the way up. Will we continue to be able to do that? I guess is what we're skirting around.
I don't know, and I can't promise that.
Uh-huh.
I'd have to look at the exact language about what the notice requirements are. I imagine there's some notice that have to be given to the town by the landowner, but whoever owns that property might just say one day, like, I want to put a fence up and put horses over there, or.
Oh, right, because it'll become part of that
Yeah.
acreage.
It would be one of the large lot properties.
That's why I was asking at the beginning of the meeting, if we would be losing access.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, that's interesting. Is that something, and this is because I really honestly don't know, but is that something that we could talk about adjusting?
Not with this plan, but with other ideas, absolutely, we should talk
Okay.
about all of those things,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, it's conceivable, that's part of lot 45, it's conceivable that whoever were to buy that lot in the future could put a house at the end of Holly instead,
Yeah,
because that's kind of a nice knoll out there.
Right, it is. I just hate to lose that continuity
Mhm.
up there. You too.
Another question, please, cut me off if I think this is not the right place to do any of this, but it sounds like there's, the crux of it is. The zoning ordinance allows you to do X number of things which you may not want to do, but by law, you're allowed to do. And aside that is, there may be things that the town, as a town, we would like to have, but you wouldn't have to do. And so there's room there for some negotiation there, where you could have some things that would be desirable both to you and to the town, but might require some adjustments to what's currently allowed. Is that
That's exactly right, yeah, and that's not a conversation for this
understood?
particular part of the process,
Understood.
but that's 100% correct. Right now, we're working with a black pen, and we don't have all the colors.
Does it meet all the requirements,
Right.
basically, right? Yeah.
Is that okay for this evening to, digest and need to think about and do, I'll do the, final notices and, take a look through it. We can work through any other detailed questions that you have, and, move this forward to, full business next month.
So your notifications just go to the adjacent homeowners or
Might
land
go a
over.
little bit wider, but it's not a super broad notice. It's each lot abutting the subdivision and each member of the council and planning commission. Yeah, but it doesn't go any wider than the immediate members.
Which is still pretty substantial, because that's
It is for a project this
most
big, there are a lot, there are a lot,
Paulette Town and Valley, not Valley, Lennon.
there are a lot of things.
I think it would be interesting, and I don't know if this is something that you guys would entertain doing. But if we as a planning commission could hold a special meeting with you all as the people who are most impacted by this immediately, because you live next to it. If you guys would be willing to put something together that would show the town what this could be instead. I don't know if it would be worth having a meeting where we can invite all of the neighbors and anybody else who might have some input as to what they'd like to see back here. People who hike these trails all the time. And get some input that way, some very pointed, specific input, not just as part of the comp plan process. But it would be nice to have something to say, this is what it could be instead.
Yeah, you see me squirming in my seat.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes, absolutely. I would love to have that meeting. I don't want to come in here and show what could
Okay.
be. I want to come and hear
Okay,
what people want it to be. We just went through a process where we showed what it could be.
Okay, the tire plant is
So-
gone.
I think a different approach, and
I'm just a visual person, I like to.
yeah,
you
me
know,
too,
like,
very much,
it
yeah.
doesn't say much to me.
I believe it, I have ideas.
Saying about it doesn't feel village residential, looking at this, I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
really see whether it does or doesn't, you know.
So if we can have a brainstorming session like that where we
Yeah.
can hear things and then be responsive to those instead of put the ideas out first, I think that would be really, really good.
I agree with that
I
on
do too.
the town planning side, that it's appropriate for us to lead it somewhat on the policy end, you know, here's what might be in the community interest and here's what we want to see. So show different types of houses, different arrangements of public space, and just give sample images and invite the public to react to, you know, what would you like? I feel like I can visualize the submission where it shows, you know, a minimum of tree cuttings or wooded lots on large areas. They don't have sidewalks, so there's a kind of a country road that sort of curves and the lots are spaced out. The houses are in the woods, they're bigger houses. There's no playground, so it feels rural. The houses are relatively large to go with large lots, so I can kind of get an idea of what that looks like. Without any commitment to that, of course, but I kind of feel a style for it, and I think we could describe that and invite the public to react to what might you like in a perfect world, what would this look like?
But are you saying you don't want to do it that way?
As long as the ideas don't come from us, I'm good. I want to hear ideas from you all, neighbors, community members at large, and maybe even counselors.
Okay,
And then we put something together and maybe we come out of that process and go, gosh, guys, like, there's no way we can do what you want. We're just gonna have to stick with this.
okay.
But kind of doubt it, or at least I'm an optimistic person, so I hope not.
It could happen. I would like to hear from you first, before doing anything. I would like to hear from council about whether or not.
Well, I feel like town council, yeah, I agree, because ultimately they're the decision makers, but I think that they're getting their feedback from the public too. So if the public is outraged, town council's not gonna be on board. So maybe we just need to put the feelers out and see what the public thinks. I'd like to see a better plan. I'd like to see some of those trails maintained for the town. We've talked a lot in this body about how much we want those trails, and we pushed for it with the Tiger Fuel Market, getting trails there, getting sidewalks. I want to continue that conversation. This is the next development that's going to happen in this town. I don't know if you have an idea on timing, but if this is going to be the next development, I'd like to see trails, and I'd like to see the green space. We can't mandate sidewalks, but maybe that could be part of it too.
And I'm not opposed to kind of a neighborhood type thing, like you were saying, the houses being so far apart, that village residential end of it, you know, could really be changed in that way. And maybe that could allow for more green space.
And so, do we have any other sections of town that are 1.5 acres per lot? I mean, like Poplar Spring maybe, because there's a lot of rural over there, but because that's huge, like Paulette Town's for the most part, you know, maybe 1/2 acre. Obviously, there's exceptions,
Yeah.
present company.
It is a odd. We've had this zoning on the books for many years and never done a large scale by right development like this. So no, this doesn't have a precedent anywhere in town. Mr. Armstrong, you might, with your issue building in the county, you might be able to mention a by right example done somewhere else along similar lines.
Burleysville Forest. So you might know that one up by the airport. It's pretty big, mostly 2-acre lots. Rural roads. Yeah, that's it. You're zooming in correctly.
Oh, okay, I know it. So, yeah.
It's just outside the village of Burleysville, but that looks pretty similar to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
For the village residential portion anyway,
Mhm.
the rural area portion, I think people can visualize a 10-acre lot probably better than they can visualize a
Yeah.
1-acre lot maybe.
And then, so you've got some ponds on here and winding road and cul-de-sac, and if it wasn't clear cut when it was built, it's certainly well wooded now.
Yeah, I think that one was a pine plantation.
But the county's neighborhood model development looks very different from this town, the kinds of things that they're building.
Yeah, they
This
go-
was in fashion 40 years ago.
If you
right?
want, yeah, if you want the other extreme, go over to Hollymead Town Center and look at the lot layouts there. Yeah.
And our ordinance has village residential cluster development, but this is not, because that would be special use permit, so this is not the cluster that we worked on 2 years ago. Okay, all right, any other comments on this? Okay. Now, I have a question for the public. Is anyone here who has feedback that they want to add for this? I saw some hands earlier.
Love to take part in any discussion that you have. Long history in the town, and on the planning commission and zoning, so. You've got a lot of information backlog would be sure. Just on the mechanics of making it happen.
Okay. Very good, thank you.
It might be helpful to do a community event kind of on site there and take a walk and look at the land and brainstorm out in the field instead of here.
That's one of the things that you guys mentioned earlier, and because people are still pretty bruised and beat up. I would recommend that for every public comment, you begin with making it clear to everyone. This is an idea forum. Nobody has to do anything here, so you can't make anybody do anything. It's what would people like to have that would appeal both to the town and to the developers as well.
Absolutely.
That takes some of the adversarial stance out of the situation.
Creative.
Would anyone else like to speak?
Just when we get to far enough into the project where you're talking about street widths, hydrants, location of hydrants and the fire department's involved in that kind of, we have not been previously in the two-path projects.
So is that covered by code, Albemarle County code, or is that's not in our ordinance, right? That's gonna be county or bigger than us, right?
the required, fire official contact is at the site plan stage prior to construction. But that with absolute respect, that does feel late to the overall planning process, because there are several other steps that are highly public before then. And so it matters. And things like being able to tabletop plan how the response on this might look, or if the town ordinances are out of date to the apparatus that the fire department has now. Things like which side of the street the fire hydrant is on can be relevant. And it only helps to have that kind of information over there.
Okay, thank you. Right. Thank you so much. Chris available? Moving into 5B, comprehensive plan research presentation.
Hello, how y'all doing?
Welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to be back. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all and sort of put away the black ink pen and get out a color palette to carry on the metaphor. So about a year ago, I was here working as an intern with Matt and Javier, and as part of my, at the time in grad school, and as part of my grad school requirements, I have to do a professional plan or a capstone project, which is typical for this grad school requirements. And I could pick any project I wanted, but the idea was that this is a professional plan that potentially could be used for the municipality or the business that I'm doing it for. So I work with a client, the town of Scottsville as my client. And at the time we were looking at the Bird Street development, and it was called the Blenheim Heights PUD in the same place that we just got done talking about. And I saw an opportunity for there to be some dialogue about what Scottsville would like to have. There's obviously, from what I saw, that anticipation for growth and interest in growth in the town, and wanted to try to help continue that conversation and make it a little easier for everybody involved. So I talked with Matt and did research and determined that there were a few ways that municipalities can look at comprehensive plan updates, and specifically future land use. And that is through scenario planning. I'll get into what scenario planning is, but that's kind of the background story for how why I'm here and everything. So I presented this project. This project was completed in December. So there's bits of it that are out of date, but I'll go over that. And Matt and I both felt like it was a helpful presentation for you all as you're starting to do your comprehensive plan update, specifically looking at future land use and sort of the vision for Scottsville and charting a path towards responsible growth for Scottsville. So I'll kind of go over what I'm gonna talk about. This presentation was also set up for professors and an academic presentation, people who may have driven through Scottsville once. So some stuff in here y'all already know. So I'll breeze over those parts, but I'll go over the study area and the demographics, which I think is helpful for me to sort of tee up how I got these scenarios. I'll give some context for what scenarios are, and I'll go over each scenario, the elements of each one, and then finally I'll give some analysis and my recommendation for them. So going over Scottsville and the region, talking about population and projections, housing, income, and context for Albemarle County. These were sort of the background information that I used for this. We're all aware of where Scottsville is, but I think it's worth reminding ourselves that we're, I say we because I grew up in Scottsville, so I have a hard time separating from that. It was also part of the interest in doing the project. our own municipality, but within Albemarle County and adjacent to 3 different counties in Buckingham, Fluvanna, and Albemarle County, with Nelson County not that far away. Incorporated since 1818 and responsible for our own zoning decisions. And looking at the background a bit more with that, the mixed income study that was done in 2018 provided, I felt like, a better understanding of the greater Scottsville area, which I've always heard but never really been able to define. This was probably the best representation of that I've been able to see. So they did a zip code survey to 22 different businesses in Scottsville and just had people write down their zip codes as they came in the door. And so they were able to sort of map different trade areas around Scottsville. And then based on that US Census data, they were able to get demographics and other pertinent information. So that's the basis for what I used for my background. I've looked into a bit of it on my own, but this was a really great resource. I specifically looked at some things like population. So it's worth noting that the town of Scottsville has a population of 556 residents, but the surrounding area, that primary and secondary trade area, has a population of almost 15,000 residents. And so that's important to understand that when we're thinking about planning for Scottsville, it's not just the 500 some odd residents within it, but there's a larger surrounding area. Some greater context too is that Albemarle County's population is much higher. It's a much larger area, obviously, but it's the Weldon Cooper Center did population projections and population gathering, and they show on this map on the left that Albemarle County has the greatest, the most population projected growth outside of like Northern Virginia, Richmond, and Norfolk. So in the Piedmont and west of Virginia, Albemarle County has the greatest projected population growth. They've projected that from 2018 to 2030 at about an additional 15,000 residents, and based on 2020 data, Albemarle County's well on their way to achieving that. Also worth noting that Scottsville's projected growth from 2018 to 2023 was the lowest out of not just Albemarle County, but the surrounding areas of Scottsville. So we're seeing growth in Albemarle County and the surrounding areas, but not necessarily in Scottsville. Looking at housing and income within those same areas, the majority of homes are owned and single family as opposed to rented or townhouses. And 10% of the housing stock is built after 1990 in Scottsville. So that tells me that we have an old housing stock of mostly single family units that are owned. The income within those areas, the secondary and primary trade areas are 44% of the households make $50,000 annually in the primary trade area, and that's by household, it's not by individual. The median household income in Scottsville, in the surrounding area of Scottsville, is $50,000. But Scottsville itself has a median household income of closer to 60,000. So again, sort of wrapping up that we have a older housing stock of single family units that are owned, and the surrounding area of Scottsville is medium to low income. So helpful context that I used when drafting these scenarios. Also worth noting that Albemarle County is our neighbor, and we need to know what they're doing, and they need to know what we're doing. They've defined development areas and rural areas. Scottsville is not near any of the rural areas, and those rural areas are directed to be used for agricultural, forestal, historical, cultural, and scenic and natural resources, and focusing development within their prescribed development areas, which are mostly around Charlottesville, Crozet, and Lake Monticello. They provided a graph of sort of the last 10 years or so of build out and how much of that was in the development area, how much of that was in the rural area. I thought this was a helpful graph because it shows the majority of the development over time has been in the development areas. I showed this to one of my professors and he actually didn't like it. He felt like that was a significant amount outside of the development areas and that there shouldn't be that much development within the rural areas. So worth noting. Albemarle County is also doing their comprehensive plan update right now. One of the studies that they did was a build out analysis, and that showed that current by right zoning in their development areas may not accommodate future growth if they're expecting the higher end of development, and the lower end of the recommended density is not sufficient to accommodate future growth. So they're pretty much seeing that either the interest in growth needs to change or their by right development in those development areas needs to change, that they're not going to match. There's going to be more pressure for development outside of those development areas. I'll go into some context for the scenarios, go over retail leakage. I'll explain what that is. I'll talk about the tire plant site and how we're where we are with that now. I'll explain what scenario planning is, and I'll talk about areas of opportunity and land use policy districts. All those I'll explain. The tire plant site, we can go on to the next. Yeah, so again, this project was completed in December of last year. So I worked with, well aware that eggs aren't in the basket at that point, and worked with my professors in academics to try to give an accurate representation of what would happen at this site. Because if we're looking at scenario planning for Scottsville, 63 acres is a very large portion of the town, which is about 1,000 acres. So at the time, Planning Commission had approved or recommended approval, and it was in front of Town Council. Based on the west downtown small area plan, they've looked into the tire plant site and determined that the highest and best use for that is some form of medium density housing or a mixed use development, and recommended planned unit development for that area. So for the purposes of this project, I assumed that the rezoning would be approved and the 205 dwelling units that were proposed were accounted for in my project, as well as the Birch Street development, which was approved. Those additional 36 dwelling units were added into my scenarios that I created. I think it's important to note that the current use of the tire plant site is vacant. It might be used for industrial storage, but in a long range sort of thinking, uses change over time. And so while we might see what the use is right now, that may very well change in the next 10 to 20 years, and probably will with multiple locations within the town. So it sort of takes a longer view, a longer perspective of planning rather than seeing what's there right now. So I felt like this was still relevant information because it still could possibly happen, some form of it. So what is scenario planning? The best quote that I've been able to find is that scenarios are a set of reasonably plausible but structurally different futures. And it's helpful to think about it in a way of, instead of asking what would you like to see happen, scenario planning asks what you think might happen. And that's based on a lot of the demographic data that I went over, and the surrounding area, looking at current zoning as well as future land use. The best example that I've been able to find of this is Fairfax City, which did the city of Fairfax, which did development scenario planning. They produced 5 scenarios, which you see on the left there. At first, they actually produced 4, But then after, they created a fifth after a community meeting, and they show different styles of development at different densities in different parts of the city. Some of these are located in higher density around town centers. The local activity is more at these intersections of major roads, while town centers, there's more concentration of density at just 2 locations. So they drafted these scenarios, they held a public, or they didn't hold a public meeting, they sent out a survey to people in the city, and they asked them which ones you would like to see. They gave some illustrative examples of different building types that might be in there, and they gave their own definition of what scenario planning is. And so my goal with this is to produce something somewhat similar for Scottsville. So I'll get into those, and the beginning of that started with defining some sort of terms and vocabulary so that there's some similarities between all of these scenarios, and that we're using some of the same terms. So I first worked with Matt and defined some areas of opportunity within the town. These are areas that I felt like could see them a significant amount of, could significantly change the town with different uses in them. So there's the downtown area along Valley Street and Main Street, the uptown area, which is mostly commercial use with the food line and the shopping center, the tire plant site, and what I coined is Blenheim Heights, which is 151 acres of vacant land. The northeast portion of that is platted, but there's currently no development on it. So you know, each one of these areas has significant opportunity to change how the town is, and so I felt like it was worth focusing on these areas when I'm doing these scenarios. I also drafted some policy districts, and these are sort of these are the colors on my palette to paint the town. Each of these scenarios will have different amounts of districts. Stable districts follow more of a by right or future land use zoning. Conservation districts are preserving critical land for environmentally critical land. Infill is developing underutilized or vacant lots. Redevelopment is increasing the density in those vacant or underutilized lots. And then I sort of drafted a plan development which follows the village residential special use for a PUD, 4 dwelling units per acre with a 30% open space requirement. Those aren't necessarily like strict numbers that you have to follow, but it was the closest representation of what a PUD could look like for the town if it was in the zoning. So I produced 3 scenarios with 3 different approaches to planning and development. And I'll give you all a minute to sort of look at these in general. I'm going to go into each one of them in more detail. And if something doesn't make sense, please feel free to ask a question, and I'll be happy to answer it, but I'll also be able to, yeah, got you. Thank you. You're gonna keep this one. So scenario 1 follows current trends continued, and this is most similar to future land use. There's a few there for you. I think there's a copy for each of you there.
Sorry.
No, you're good. Yeah, so scenario 1 follows the development pattern most similar to current zoning and future land use, mostly low density housing, moderate retail growth, and suburban development pattern. Scenario 2 has a more market driven expansion with the introduction of cluster developments. The scenario could quadruple the town's population. I'll get into that a bit more later, and it follows more of an auto-oriented retail development. Scenario 3 focuses development along the major corridors and is a compact development, mostly along Route 20 and Route 6. And this offers the most diverse housing opportunities and focuses development along those major corridors. So the best way that I felt like to describe how each of these scenarios may look is by taking little snapshots of different areas of the town, showing you what those areas might look like under these scenarios. These are sort of examples of scale and building size and design, and not necessarily the exact development that I think should go there. So we'll start with scenario 1, downtown. I'll go over all of the numbers at the end, but this is sort of just a conceptual understanding of what scenario 1 could look like downtown. We can see the on the next slide, the bus depot on Main Street that's been sitting vacant. Under this scenario, places like that could be renovated for apartments or houses, and this might help infill Main Street. The example on the left are a couple of duplexes that's in the Woolen Mills neighborhood of Charlottesville. Felt like that was a similar scale and design that could go at the location of the bus depot. Up to Blenheim Heights in scenario 1, we can zoom in there. The picture on the left is existing, that's the hayfield. And under scenario 1, you can see some development very similar to what's on Holly Road right now. Single family units on 3/4 acre lots, low density housing, and extensions to public infrastructure. Another example is the subdivision ordinance that was, or the subdivision preliminary plat that was shown to you today. That's probably a more accurate representation than what I have drafted. In the uptown area, this is serving more of the commercial uses within the town. On the next slide, we can see the vacant lot that's next to Ace Hardware and across from the Food Lion shopping area. A building of a similar size as what's seen on the right could go in that location. That's about 15,000 square feet. That would meet all of the retail demand produced by scenario 1. This follows more of the car-oriented design that area currently has. Moving on to scenario 2, which is market-driven expansion, and again looking downtown to the same bus depot. That area could be renovated. That building and other vacant and underutilized buildings could be renovated for retail uses, restaurants, similar to what's seen in downtown Charlottesville with the, I think that's Monsoon. It is. We are all familiar. So you can also see improvements to infrastructure with more pedestrian improvements like crosswalks and sidewalks, which currently don't exist in some areas along West Main or along Main Street. Then as we go on to Blenheim Heights, that's in the planned development district. There's 2 opportunities there. One is sort of the planned unit development on the next slide, which is similar to the sort of development that has gone on at Old Trail. I felt like this was a pretty accurate example because it shows single family housing and townhouses with open space around a lake, which the Blenheim Heights area has a lake, 2 lakes. And so that sort of development focuses the open space around those lakes, preserving it as open space And we see more of a mix of housing there, single family and townhomes. It follows a clustered development, which we're familiar with. Along with that, on Blenheim Heights, there's enough retail demand produced by the added residential population that there could be a specialty retail business there of about 2,000 to 3,000 square feet. And this would serve a niche market, something like a wine and cheese shop or a small diner, similar to the size of the black building in that image. Uptown in scenario 3 follows still car-oriented design, but has larger demand for retail. And we can see that a larger building, somewhere around 30,000 square feet of retail space at that location would meet all of the retail demand, along with the retail demand that would be met downtown and in Blenheim Heights, sort of a more dispersed orientation of retail. This would increase traffic along Route 20 and Route 6 because there are more shops and businesses there. Currently, what's in this building is on Preston Avenue in Charlottesville. It has 2 restaurants, a smoothie shop, and a bike store. So that's sort of the scale of retail that a 30,000 square foot building could have. So something similar to that at that location in Uptown. And then on to scenario 3, which again focuses development along major corridors of Route 20 and Route 6, and preserves open space with the Van Cleef Nature Area and Blenheim Heights. We'll go downtown again to the bus depot, and under this scenario, there would be more pedestrian improvements, more businesses redeveloped or infilled on underutilized or vacant lots, and looks somewhat similar to what Gordonsville looks like now, which is the image on the right. They've had a lot of redevelopment in their downtown in the last 10 years. And so that that actual image is a good concept for what Main Street could look like. Think of it as well of Valley Street between Main Street and Bird Street. That block is a pretty accurate density that could continue on Main Street and as well up Valley Street, up Route 20. Blenheim Heights would be potentially preserved as a conservation area and be most similar to Walnut Creek Park, which is the image on the right. There's enough land there and a lake there that there could be more hiking trails than there are right now. Could be biking trails, could be more lake access for fishing or boating. And again, more public open space. This is achieved by focusing development in a more dense area of downtown along those major corridors. Onto the Uptown area, which could be more dense and more of a mixed use that we can see on the next slide of the mixed use building that's shown there. This is close to Pantops. Those 3 buildings have the first floor of restaurants or coffee shops, and then the second and third floor are residential. So that type of use could be seen uptown. There would be mixed use buildings, higher density, and the design of the building also regulates parking to the rear of the lot and prioritizes more pedestrian activity with sidewalks and planting strips between the road and the building itself. So we can get into the numbers now. There's a lot of numbers on here, but I can give you sort of the takeaways from it. Looking at additional residents, scenario 1 and scenario 3 have roughly the same additional residents. Now this does not account for the current population of the town, which is 556. These are additional residents through these scenarios. So scenario 1 and scenario 3 have very similar additional resident projections, but they achieve them in very different ways. Scenario 1 does that through a more expansive development pattern of single family houses. Scenario 3 accomplishes the same population growth through developing along the corridor and more dense development in those areas. Total, and then scenario 2 for added residents, again, like I said, nearly quadruples the current town's population mostly through the planned unit development of Blenheim Heights. That also creates much more retail demand. Those retail demand numbers are directly correlated to that additional population. And so they're very similar between scenario 1 and scenario 3, having similar numbers to scenario 2. The biggest difference that I think we can see with scenario 1 and scenario 3 is that, yes, they do accommodate the same number of additional residents, but the public open space is much less within scenario 1, essentially saying that you're gaining the same population, but a lot more of the town's land is privately owned, whereas in scenario 3, development is concentrated along corridors, and that allows more land to be available for public open space. And then, you know, maybe some helpful context for looking at green space per added resident, with, you know, about 3,000 square feet per added resident in scenario 1, 14,000 square feet per added resident in scenario 3, and scenario 2 has somewhere in the middle, still some public open green space through the planned unit development ordinance that requires 30% open space, and some expansion of the Van Cleef nature area. So that's sort of the breakdown. It's also worth mentioning that there are opportunities for scenarios between 1 and 2, between 2 and 3, and beyond scenario 3. These are 3 within a capstone project done for grad school. There are certainly more possibilities for development scenarios for Scottsville, but these are sort of a good options that I felt like showed significantly different development patterns that can sort of get the conversation going of like, all right, well, what are we drawn to? Which one speaks to us the most? I realized too that this was done as an academic exercise. I didn't take it as that. I did this project with the hopes that I could present it to Planning Commission and it could actually be used. I felt encouraged by the research that I did, seeing that the city of Fairfax used something very similar to this to reach out to community members and see what they thought was the type of development they'd like to see. And that helped them. So sort of wrapping up what city of Fairfax did, they received the feedback from those surveys and then used that data to help them draft their future land use map. So there's not, you know, you may ask, this is a great document, but like, what do we do with this? That is an option of something that you could do, is present these scenarios to the community members, maybe one of the outreach teams that you're putting together for comprehensive plan update. Give this to them, ask people what they think about them, and that might help you get some better answers of what do people in this town want to see. I'll move on now to sort of my recommendations.
Well, before you do,
Yeah,
I mean, let me just admire this. I think
Thank you.
It's really helpful to this. I mean, this exactly illustrates what we were talking about, or what I was at least alluding to with this other plan. I mean, scenario 3, you have similar population group to scenario 1, but you have 6 times the amount of green space per resident. I mean, that's great.
Thank you.
What can we do with that? I mean, it's
I was
amazing.
thinking you should come and.
Yeah.
If that's,
I'm not
if
kidding.
that's, no, I would be happy to, if that's what y'all decide to do, I'm more than happy to be involved with the comprehensive
Yes,
plan update, if that's.
We might need you to explain it.
This subdivision
Mhm.
Well, and
review and outreach.
it answers the question of, you know, the questions that were asked here of, we want to know what you would like to see here.
Right.
Not just for this area of town, but for the whole town. And so that's sort of the goal of this, in my opinion, the goal of this is to help people who are interested in developing their land or interested in buying land within the town to see what is the town's plan for this. If I want to build my house on a 2-acre lot, maybe I should do it here instead of here, because the town has showed me that. If I want to build my gas station, maybe I should do it here instead of here. So it helps, I think it helps sort of speed up the conversation that happened tonight, and I'm sure at other times, of, well, this is what we're allowed to do, but we want to know what y'all would like to do, and it helps speed up that conversation and maybe makes it a bit more clear.
Yeah, I think the imagery is helpful, and for people like me, the numbers and the statistics are helpful. So, yeah, I think this really does a good job of illustrating.
Thank you. Yeah, I can get into my recommendations, and then I'm happy to talk more about each of these. So I recommend that Scottsville adopt a development pattern most similar to scenario 3. This creates the greatest amount of public green space. It offers the most housing diversity within the town. The development along existing infrastructure follows a more sustainable planning theory. It improves pedestrian-oriented development and is a reasonable population growth for the town. And it enhances the small town charm for the town. So that was the wrapping up of it. The next slide gives yeah, thank you. And then the next slide we can kind of leave on there for reference for people. And I know we have documents in front of us, but I'm happy to answer any questions about it. Talk about what to do next. Part of everything I learned about in grad school, I pretty much said, that's great, but how do we implement that? Because I feel like that's where things get lost, is that we get documents that sit on shelves and they're given to people, but they don't know what to do with them. So I am here to help try to answer some of those questions. What do we do with this? As well as any other questions. If there was anything confusing about how I got numbers or different areas, I'm happy to talk about those too. But yeah. Open to questions.
Well done.
Thank you.
I guess another question that I have is, who pays for the infrastructure? I mean, I can kind of see in scenario 3 where you've got, I mean, where you have more density, there's more opportunity for the developer to be the one responsible for some of the infrastructure. And then plan 1, there's just not a whole lot of infrastructure. So what about 2? There's a lot of improvements to infrastructure there. Who's paying for that?
Well, so initially that's sort of, it's up to the town in some sense, but it's also mostly done through new development where, you know, for example, this subdivision plat, they have these roads drawn and they're responsible for building these roads, but they're public roads. And so the immediate cost is not on the town, as far as I understand, but the responsibility for maintaining those roads is, and that comes at a greater cost sometimes. It depends on how much road you're building. You're also installing public water and sewer to connect to these houses. I know that's not a requirement for new houses in Scottsville that they connect to the public water and sewer, but if they choose to do that, or if it's built for them, then it's the maintenance cost that's really the weight that's felt through whoever is responsible, whether that's the town or ACSA or the county. And I know Matt has the certain details of who's responsible for each of those, and correct me if I explain that.
There's an important population threshold of 3,500 residents, below which VDOT is responsible for all of road maintenance. In Scottsville now, we see VDOT snowplows come through, and VDOT does a repaving project when necessary. Above 3,500 residents, towns form public works departments and pick up all of those responsibilities. I mean, it's noteworthy in all three of your scenarios that we stay under that 3,500 population threshold. Right. So we really benefit from developers building infrastructure, and VDOT or the regional sewer authority maintains it, and the town isn't obligated on those things. So we really benefit from those scenarios that keep us under 3,500. Being able to look 30 years into the future and not tripping that threshold is important.
Yeah, we're definitely very far off from that.
Right, but from 500 to 3,500 is a tremendous range for scenario planning.
Right.
There's a lot can be done in town before you get to that point.
I have to say, it's interesting, doing planning in an area, there's a lot of talk about we should plan this growth. It should be, you know, according to our plan and what it should look like. In scenario 3, you have a big, huge bit of green space. Who's to say that, you know, the people who own that land want to do that? You know what I mean? Like, you can plan for that, but I don't own the land and the town doesn't own the land. So where does that kind of fit into a plan like this?
I think it comes from, I mean, hopefully some of the people that would participate in the community outreach about future land use, whether it's this or whatever future land use conversations you have, are going to speak up about that and maybe say, well, I don't want someone walking in my backyard, even though, you know, it's adjacent to public open space.
Yeah.
As far as implementing that, there's what's required to get there so that you have all of the green space shown on there as actual public open space is the town or another entity purchasing the land and designating it. That's really where it's ownership of the land. That's really where it comes down to. And you know, so currently, for example, if we follow scenario 3 and that's the future land use map looks exactly like that, I'm not suggesting that, but if it does, the county or the town, someone who wants to build a park can look there and say, oh, this isn't developed. I want to talk to the landowner, buy this land.
Right.
Build
So you
a park
put
there.
plans in place to
Right.
kind of make that happen.
The goal of this is to sort of show I want to dance. These are the things I want to have happen. We can't necessarily make all these things happen on our own, but it goes a long way to show these are our intentions, and we hope that you follow these. We're going to have a lot of questions for you if you don't, because you know these documents exist. You see what we want here.
Right.
We hope that you bring something that we haven't even thought of, because we've thought about it and this is what we think. So either do this or bring us something better. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, private ownership pretty much is the answer, the short answer to that question. Yeah.
And, you know, maybe with looking at something like scenario 3, because I was thinking about that too, Molly. This property is spoken for, obviously, it's already been, you know, the proposed subdivision. But if we do say this is our intention, maybe then that gives us a little more latitude to look at this and say, bring us a special use permit that clusters homes and keeps as much green space as possible.
Yeah.
So,
Gotcha.
yeah. But yeah, right.
So following that vision as much as
As
possible.
much, right,
Yeah.
yeah.
And, you know,
So
it
scenario 4 could be a combination of 2 and 3, for example.
anything, yeah,
Right.
yeah, it could be even more land conserved and even more density, it could be density in different places. It could be a whole different.
These are just
Design
three-
of
three plus development.
Right, these are the big buckets. If I was in grad school much longer, I would make more scenarios.
If one, for example, one that maybe a climate change oriented student might have oriented to, the levee's not high enough. The new 1,000-year flood is too big, and we can't raise our levee higher. It doesn't make sense to invest in downtown. All the change has to happen above 450 feet.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the case, and I think the downtown investment is justified, but there's other scenarios that take more.
Right.
With a different set of assumptions, you drive very different investment.
Yeah, full transparency, I focused a lot on sustainable development and smart growth. And so I think that comes across in the scenarios that I produced. These are different forms of development. They have elements of smart growth and sustainable development within them. So I guess acknowledging bias, but right, exactly, there are many different ways to look at it, yeah. And it's worth noting too that the city of Fairfax started the process with 4 scenarios. They did their surveys and community meeting, and they heard from the public that they wanted something else, so they made a 5th scenario. So that was encouraging to me that, you know, the part of someone might come up with a great idea of you know, a different way to plan for future growth. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak with you all later as you continue to do comprehensive plan update and work with the outreach team on this. You're welcome to reach out to me on that. I'd be happy to do this talk again.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Chris.
so thank you all for the
Thank you
opportunity.
very much.
Yes, thank you.
Great.
Let's look at dissertation as.
Bob, Martha, thank you. Done good. Does that help with transition into some of the comprehensive plan goals? I find this to be very helpful and could easily see using it as a compound exhibit. I think this is really valuable work that we could directly use in the rest of the whole.
A lot to add to the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think we literally need one focus group or planning session on land use and which of these scenarios or the alternative is what most speaks to you, right?
Well, we've got that coming up.
When's that?
Isn't it like the 30th? A special meeting to talk about land use.
Public?
Oh,
Oh, no,
meant
no, she meant public. Okay,
Mhm.
I thought you meant us. Like, yes. Sorry.
I could talk about this all day. All right, old business. How you guys feeling? I kind of feel like comprehensive plan might be a little, bigger. Should we, is there anything that we can accomplish in a reasonable window of time?
Any specific follow-up in prep for your next meeting? I want to make sure that I'm getting you adequate prep for these meetings and keeping things moving along. I know you have the special one call for the end of the month.
Yeah.
What feels most important when you follow up with you last week?
Can't think of any prep. I mean, we know where to get the maps from. You guys don't have any copies or anybody to jump in?
That was specifically for, well, the 30th was for the land use. I wanted to know. Let me find the land use. I mean, I think this is kind of perfect. I was gonna ask, like, what goals have we possibly already met? We kind of talked about that at the meeting last week.
Should we begin scheduling public meetings and how should that look?
Sure.
I mean, we had talked about the purpose of the next meeting being to come up with the questions and you know, points that we'd like to get at, but we don't need to delay scheduling.
Yeah, I would like to get I would like to talk about this with the public sooner rather than later in light of.
And we need imagery, we need this, because this, you know, speaks to people in a way that my language doesn't. But even for me, this is great to see. I definitely would like to see, he just left. I'd like to see what a plan would look like for the East Village that retains some green space and included more density. What would that look like? I think people need to see that. And again, it could be a plan that we create, we could have 4 scenarios. Is that something you could work up for us? I mean, I know you're not long as you didn't do anything.
I'm happy to work with the town, if you all would like to work together, I'd be happy to continue the dialogue.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, you're not, you know, our employee anymore, so. I don't know how to use any kind of software that could make those manipulations. Oh, Mr. Long, is that something you'd be good at?
Are you glad you came?
Okay. I mean, I think that could be really helpful for people to see something visual. What this plan might look like. You know, preserving the trees, how many trees would get cut down with the existing plan versus with some sort of alternative, and maybe a couple of different scenarios.
I also liked Matt's suggestion about going and holding the meeting on the land itself and actually being able to look and see, you know, this is exactly where we're talking about.
Well, it's such a huge, but you know, put on your hiking boots and go for a walk. Yeah.
Yep.
I think that'd be awesome. Okay, I don't have any further questions about the land use goals for our next meeting.
I have not made much progress on the homestays. We tabled last month with a few questions about the details of how the health department and fire marshal outreach and enforcement might work on these. And I haven't been able to meet up with those folks. So that stays on old business until I have those answers. You're looking for a few line item edits within that homestay text to make sure that all the properties are being treated fairly by right and SUP, and that they have the health and safety regulations they need. It's not your intent to make a by right homestay harder than what is currently by special use permit. We want to make sure that fire marshal and fire department are happy with the permitted uses that we're doing. So
Okay.
I need to work on that.
Okay, very good.
Hey, Matt, did I miss an email? I feel like you were gonna send that document with the goals, the 2023 goals. Is that true?
Yes, I checked it
Uh-huh.
and didn't do it right after our last meeting, but I did it right before this one, so you have it.
Okay, so it's, there were quite a few and I think,
couldn't
I was
remember
like,
if
did I
dug it
miss
but
one?
Yes, I dug that file back up. and sent it
Okay.
back. It has, this set of, possible zoning updates. That
Okay.
we did consider, we did some of them last year, and, others remain.
All
It
right.
might be a good starting point for some goals.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, thank you for that.
Can I ask, I think the answer is no, but for the homestays, or more specifically for like Airbnbs. Is there a requirement now that those are inspected for health and safety?
I have not been requiring documents from those other agencies before we approve them.
Right.
And so what I want to check to make sure that we're doing correctly or changing if we need to is it the property owner's obligation after they're permitted to get up with what they need as appropriate? Or is it something that we need to see vetted before we issue it? Like, if there's a letter from the fire marshal, yes, this basement is adequately configured that you can put people in it. Or if the basement windows and doors and electrical weren't the way they needed to be, is it any kind of negligent on us if we approve that in the condition that's in?
Okay,
So what order does it come?
right. I think I'm just asking in general, when you put a house up for Airbnb, is that required? Is
As I recall,
Airbnb required or?
a host checklist, they invite you to, check the box, do you have a fire extinguisher
Oh,
on the site? But if you say no, they still take you on.
okay. That's what I'm thinking.
We shouldn't trust Airbnb to import the fire code.
Right. Okay. I make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Oh, I second
All in favor? Aye. All right, thank you.
Thank you.